Linked Senior. And at Linked Senior, we're very excited to be leading this initiative called Activity Strong in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And this summit is the 5th summit that we're doing. We have amazing numbers. There's lots of reasons for that, but I think one of them is the theme that we selected for today's event, which is Dementia Disco. And throughout the 4 sessions we've already had and the breaks, I think there's a very common thread, which is there are lives to be had. There are many lives to be had, many of them great lives to be had with any type of cognitive journey. So we've talked a lot about dementia inclusion. As I challenged the audience previously, if you don't really know what dementia inclusion, let me just ask you or ask yourself that question, which is, if I had dementia, would I be treated differently? Would you treat me differently? And why? Right? So that's a great way to start that discussion. So we're about to start our 5th session today. I'm very excited to invite Alicia, Carolyn. We're still waiting on Angie to turn on her camera, but we'll give her a few seconds as we just go through, hey Angie, just a few housekeeping reminders. And oh, you even have the disco ball. Look, Angie, wait, I have mine here. Look. Where was I? Oh yeah, the reminders. Let me go through this quickly. So we can earn up to 6 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and or NCCDPC credits. To earn the credits, you need to attend the 4 sessions, so as few as 1 or as many as 6. To get these certificates, you'll need to fill in the survey. So by the end of the day, June 28th, on Friday, so we can process it. And just as a note, due to the large number of attendees today and the holiday weekend, we'll start issuing these certificates on the week of July 8th to the 12th. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out at webinars with an S, webinars@linksenior.com. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. So if you hear something cool, interesting, and if you want to go back to it, it will be available on our website. And obviously, feel free to share that with friends. I was making a joke about families, but yeah, actually feel free to share it with your families and colleagues. And as we're using Zoom, 2 features, chat and Q&A. If you're using the chat, make sure you select everyone. And as I love to remind everyone that I cross path with, please learn and please have fun. All right, so I'm going to start introducing our panelists, but just before I do that, I do want to share a couple of things, which is a friend of ours a few months ago, almost a year ago, started this idea of quote unquote dementia nerds, hashtag dementia nerds. And I think it's I'm not going to say that dementia is cool yet, but I think that anyone that works in the field of dementia today is cool and does extremely meaningful work. So for me, it's a real honor, it's a real pleasure, and I'm actually really excited to start our 5th session today, here from Resident Engagement Champion. And we have 3 amazing leaders, Angie McAllister, who's the Spark Performance League Commissioner, more on that, with an amazing organization in Minnesota called LifeSpark. We also have Carolyn Adassis, who's the Assistant Vice President of Resident Engagement with an amazing organization called the Mather. Does a lot of work around research, around enablement of wellness. And then we also have Alicia Fenstermacher, who's the Vice President of Purposeful Living with Presbyterian Senior Living. So with that, I'm going to unshare my screen. Welcome, the 3 of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, very excited for our conversation. Hi. So I'm kind of jealous about your background, Angie. I have a belt. I have a wrestling belt. How about that?
I like it.
All right. So I'd love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. I think you have the 3 of you combined, and even just the 3 of you, amazing experience, amazing thought, and the work that you do is really both innovative, meaningful, but also actionable. So do you mind sharing just a little bit more about you, your work, your organization, and what you love about it? And we'll start with you, Carolyn, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everybody for still being here. It sounds like it's been an amazing day. I have been in the senior living industry really since I was 16 years old, when I had to do it actually for volunteer work after shoplifting from a JCPenney, but you won't hear that story today. But I'm very grateful that that happened at the age of 16 because I really fell in love with working in senior living communities. My first real senior living job was in my early 20s as a memory support program coordinator. And that was, 20 years ago. And I have gone through many roles in that time, but the majority of my career has been spent as an art therapist. So I'm really passionate about how we can use the arts and culture to really transform how we think about care, how we think about aging, and especially how we think about memory support. I have been working with Mather for 13 years. We are an organization based in Chicago, but we have senior living communities in Virginia, Arizona, and Chicagoland. And as Charles mentioned, we have the Mather Institute, which is our research team, and community initiatives that does outreach outside of our walls. I think what I'm most excited about is actually the topic we have today. No matter how long we feel like we've been in this industry and we have expertise or we get tapped to be on panels like this, we are always constantly having to completely relearn everything and challenge what we think we know and stay curious. And I actually feel like I have much less certainty these days about what I think I'm an expert in than I used to have, which is very unsettling, but also really invigorating. So that is my favorite thing about this conversation today.
Thank you, Carolyn. Angie, you want to go?
Oh, sure. So I'm Angie McAllister. I have been, like Carolyn, in this work for 19 years. I think my entire adult life has been in the world of senior living. Or when I was 19 years old is when I started. And so that's 29 years ago. You all can do the math. I'm getting ready to celebrate a very big birthday in a few weeks. So the disco ball is great. I work for a company called LifeSpark, and I've been there for a few years with them. And I think for me, more on the title later, Charles says, but I have the great privilege to work in a lot of disruption and innovation in this area and really bring a new outlook to what we're doing, right? And how do we put meaning into the lives of people, which we do, all of the people on this call. I'm just so excited to be here. I think about my first job in senior living. As Carolyn said, I was a CNA. And so I entered as a CNA at the age of 19. And within a year, I became the activities director. And, that's really how my career started. And I was able to just be with the elders and love them and create those meaningful relationships, right? And so when we think about dementia inclusion, I think so much about what we've said in the past and all of the great things that have been talked about today. But to me, it really comes down to that relationship, Charles, and how we're able to form those meaningful relationships. And that's what our work here is, and that's our goal. And that's it for me. So excited to be here and spend some time with you guys this afternoon.
I would also share with the audience, and I hope that's okay, Angie, that Angie has usually a word that she chooses at the beginning of the year, and she kindly shared this one on LinkedIn at the beginning of the year, and it was glow. So I felt that it's the only reason why you invited today, Angie. No, I'm joking. Not at all.
Well, thanks. I will be very thoughtful about my word of the year from now on, Charles, then, so I get invited back.
Thank you so much, Angie. Alicia, sorry.
It is so good to be with you. I guess the late bloomer in the group, because I didn't start working in aging services until I was 21. So it's been a couple years, quite a few years. I'm proud to claim being 47. So claim your age with bowls so that we can erase the ageism piece of the world too. I am a licensed social worker, nursing home administrator, activity director certified.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
There's a kind of echo. Do you think it's possible that it comes from your computer or yeah? Sorry, go ahead.
Is it better?
I don't know. Are you hearing this, Angie and Karen as well?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Let me try without the headset and see if this is better. Is this better?
Unplug your headphones and plug them back in.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian. Brian is magical.
Is it better?
Nope, not that magical, I don't guess.
How about now with the headphones complete? Without the headphones, is that better?
Iffy.
Continue talking. That's right.
Is that a little bit better without the headphones? No.
Not really. Do you mind? Let's do you mind try to call in? Is that
Absolutely.
yeah?
Let me figure that out. Let me put myself on mute and figure that out. We'll just continue on.
Sure. I can ask a quick question to Carolyn or Angie. You know, when we were preparing, we thought about this idea that for us, we were making progress until COVID happened, and then we had to go backward and so on. So maybe to tell, if one of you don't mind jumping in, like, where do you feel this is for your organization, and what excites you about that in a way? Carolyn or Angie? Yeah, Angie.
Yeah, Angie, go ahead.
No, so, I think when we were talking about this, we were really talking about what has happened and transpired over the last 4 years, right? And the way culture in general has moved to become very more of a selfish inward culture versus what we saw prior to the pandemic. And I think a lot of that comes and really comes from the isolation that people felt and saw during the pandemic. And it became a very me first culture. And I think what we're seeing now start to evolve again and hopefully in a better way is this idea of we, and how do we build community, and we have this idea of we and us really needing each other. And so I think that many people, and I know Caroline had shared some of their best practices and things that they had launched as well, that really took a back seat during the pandemic. And I think that as we're moving forward, I know at our organization, we're really moving into this we culture, and how do we build this idea of community? What does that look like? And that really creates a resilience that people can utilize, that inner strength and resilience that we've all become a lot more resilient since the pandemic, whether we want to face that or believe that or not. We all have a different strength that we had previously. I really believe that. And it's the same for our elders. So how do we harness that with each other and really grow stronger? And so I think that's some of what we were talking about. And I know, Caroline, you had some other thoughts too, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things, Charles, that pop up for me when you ask this question. I definitely acknowledge that in somebody who has a role like mine, right, that's in a corporate office overseeing multiple communities, pre-pandemic, we were really proud that we had packaged, what we thought was a really exciting memory support model all around creative strengths and connection and nature and wellness. And I still am really passionate about that and really believe in what we've done. But the one thing that the pandemic was really good at was just dismantling sort of organization-wide standards, right? Everybody kind of had to do things on their own terms, and we have lost a little bit of that momentum. But the other thing that I find really fascinating about the years that we're in is that along with this post-pandemic period where everybody's been reevaluating their priorities and their work-life balance and all of that, organizations like ours across our industry are much more invested in things like diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Belonging, wellness. And yet I think that as a whole, our industry has in the past 2 years really dramatically left care venues and specifically memory support out of that increased focus. And so that it's kind of an identity crisis, I think, for all of us that do this kind of work around, okay, if we've had a priority shift around belonging and inclusion, why does that somehow not extend to people living with cognitive impairment and the staffing issues that have happened since, the pandemic? I know everybody on this call feels that, that suddenly expertise around engagement is kind of centered on a few people. And if those few people burn out or need to set boundaries in their life, whole programs kind of ride on their shoulders. So it's a real struggle, not just for me, but for our entire industry, I think, to come to terms with those those issues.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. So, let's get into our second question, which is obviously a lot of our discussion today. Actually, sorry, Alicia, are you on?
I am. Is this any better? Sometimes when you
Oh,
leave,
it's
you come back.
amazing. Yes, it's amazing. You're here with us. This is perfect. All right. So, you, Alicia, would love to hear more about your work, your organization, and what you love about it all.
Absolutely. If you start to not hear me, someone give me a thumbs up and I'll know what that means. That'll be our code sign. So I guess I'm the late bloomer. That's what I was saying. I started in aging services when I was 21. So I was a little older than the rest of you. It's been a couple years. I've definitely embraced my age and, to end ageism. Full disclosure, I'm 47. So I'm very proud of that. And I hope to have another 30 years of being able to work and contribute. I'm a licensed social worker, nursing home administrator, activity director, and really a lifelong learner. There's something I'm always curious about. So I am fortunate, though, to be the vice president of purposeful living for Presbyterian Senior Living. And organizationally, we serve 6,000 individuals, older adults, over 3 states, not only in life plan communities, but in other senior housing options, like market rate and tax credit housing. My responsibilities are awesome. I am totally blessed. Everything with quality of life, I get to be a part of. So the aspects of wellness, and I support the teams that are our social workers, our community life, our chaplains, memory support, resident empowerment, wellness. It's, I'm really just lucky to work with an amazing group of people. And that's what I love about what I do, is the people who call the place where I work their home, right? And that I respect that I'm entering their home, and that the people who I work with are amazing. And then with dementia inclusion, really just excited to be uncomfortable again. When we were kind of sharing before today to prepare, when I first started in aging services, there were things that had me unsettled. And I would ask questions, and I got used to things and just became complacent. And it can't be that way. I can't be complacent. Once you start seeing what needs to change, you have a responsibility, right, to do that. And so that's, the dementia inclusion movement. I believe in taking small steps towards what that looks like. And I'm just really excited to be here. And I apologize that I missed the part of the conversation while I was doing some tech changes. So
you're with us. That's
I am.
Yeah. So thanks for answering. Thanks for letting us know what you think about, how you think about dementia inclusion. Carolyn and Angie, would love to hear your thoughts about it. If you don't mind starting, Carolyn, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about how inclusion relates to my role is interesting because, again, in prepping this call, we were all reflecting on the fact that it's interesting to be an advocate for something like dementia inclusion when you work in organizations like most of us do that have locked memory support units. I will say that I am really passionate about the way we do dementia training in our organization, and that is that the biggest piece of our training is not about Dementia 101 and what's going on in the brain, but actually about helping people realize that people living with dementia have amazing strengths and can experience well-being every day. And it's up to us as a community to recognize those strengths rather than focusing on weaknesses. And this kind of key training concept that it's not the neurological changes in someone's brain that take away their sense of self, but the fact that other people stop treating them like a person. And I think that often, like when you think about dementia training, actually you could go through hours of dementia training and leave a session feeling much heavier and more miserable and tragic than when you started. And people could be experts in dementia care, but have gone through hours and hours where it has been drilled into them that this is an absolute tragedy, which absolutely, as a therapist, I recognize there is a lot of grief and loss. But if we are training the tragedy narrative only, we are reinforcing fear, and what we fear, we segregate. So for me, the biggest piece of thinking about inclusion in my role is getting my entire organization, getting our whole industry, encouraging our residents, their families, our staff to think about dementia as a community issue and a societal issue rather than an individual diagnosis. So that's really about training people and encouraging people to use systems thinking and a systems lens. And so one more thing I'll say about that is that at Mather, we talk a lot about wellness, but often people, not just in senior living, but in any industry, think of wellness as something you are doing well or badly on your own, right? Like you're choosing to go to the gym, you're choosing to drink water, you're choosing to go to your yoga class or drink your green juice. But we don't often openly recognize the ways that communities and societies either support well-being or really limit it. And when it comes to a neurological diagnosis like dementia, society and community are huge factors in limiting well-being. And we need to take that on rather than just kind of hiding behind, oh, you have an individual diagnosis. So that's something I'm clearly really passionate about. And I believe I can, change hearts and minds about that from my seat. But to kind of everybody on this call, sometimes I feel like I miss the days when I was the memory support program coordinator, right? Or the person in the community. I feel like maybe I had more of an impact in that seat. So I want to encourage everybody to not feel like, oh, one day when I'm a VP, I'll make the change. Like we can really do it from anywhere.
Yeah, many thoughts to react, but I want to leave Angie. Angie, would love to hear your thoughts as well on that.
Wow, I'm so inspired by Carolyn's thoughts. And so, when you, just to piggyback off of some of that, whenever we think about this idea of dementia inclusion, and Carolyn's spot on saying, don't wait until you're in some larger role to be that advocate and be that person, because I also can remember feeling very limited when I worked as a CNA, right? And so how a big part of dementia inclusion is helping people to embrace and empower the people who are working closest to our elders. And that's really, really important, because that's the mindset of how we're building this connected community. And so just thinking about that, first off, and appreciate Carolyn's thoughts on that. And then, really thinking about how are we focusing on servanthood, empathy, all of those things that really matter to people. And back to Carolyn's thought again, we do spend, a lot of us on here can say, oh, I've had tons of education in dementia. I may be a certified dementia practitioner. I may be this, but what does that look like in practice? And how are we really practicing a lifestyle that's really embracing every person? And also thinking about, back to the idea that we've heard so much today, right? About nothing about us without us. And we love that concept. And, I think we heard Jen Carson say that just a little bit ago before we got on with the work that she's doing. But thinking about that, how are we being more inclusive of helping people to have the decision-making power? Because it's so often, and I've been working in culture and person-centered care for almost my entire career, and it's so often that people have said to me, it's hard to do person-centered care in memory care, or it's hard to do person-centered care. How do we help people to really understand that we need to put the decision-making power into the people's hands that need to make the decision? And then it doesn't become so scary, because it just becomes a part of our life, right? Just like we make decisions every day, and I had coffee this morning and I had my favorite, and there's everybody who has their favorite something that they're not getting, and how do we hear that voice and make sure that we're empowering people? So I think that's a big part of it for me. And then the other thing that I will be remiss about if I don't bring up is, how are we infusing creativity, and what does that look like? Because the idea of building culture, really, when you think and when you do a lot of research back on this, comes from artists, right? Artists are trained to build culture, and that's what they're trained to do. And so when you start to go through the arts, and it really helps to speak. And I think my friend Ann Basting says it so well, is that our imagination is the language of dementia. And that's my favorite quote from her. And I want to bring that up today, because I think that that's so powerful. And the audience that we have here today, you use your imagination every single day to build the programs, to interact with people, and think about how to tap into someone else's imagination is a very powerful tool. And I think that also brings a lot of inclusion and openings for that to happen.
Yes, so many yeses right there. And you know, the thing about choice that I find kind of you know how many choices we make, like I make, like the typical person makes, right? I heard this number is like 35,000 choices every day, like the color of your socks, like whatever, like you decide. And I always find it interesting to say, well, how many choices can residents make, you know, in the environment that they live? And how many choices can they make if they live in the area that is with dementia? And how many do we actually allow them to do? And so that discussion about choice, I think is amazing. And yeah, just echoing what you were saying about Jennifer Carson, she didn't have time, but hopefully we'll get in September. The whole work that she's doing around exploring the legality of having people locked in units, in memory care units, like how is it legal, first of all? So I think there's a lot of really interesting conversation that are happening now. And Carolyn, thank you so much also for sharing. I don't know if it's vulnerability, but your idea about choice can be made even before being a VP. That idea of empowerment, like good organization, the three of your organization did well, but that's something that is important. So I feel we could talk the whole afternoon, but we're not. We're going to get into the next session, which is our next question, which is that the three of you have done an amazing work at explaining different aspects of inclusion, which is the future. Now, your role is not only about dreaming, right? Your role is also about what's the strategy around the vision to enable that vision, right? So from that future goal to now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And Carolyn, if you don't mind starting, what does your strategy to vision look like? How do you think about it from today to future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, and I've mentioned this, I think in past conversations we've had about kind of the idea of training employees to be change agents or what it means. We often say, oh, when somebody starts in a role, you know, we have an orientation checklist and this is how they're going to receive information. But I think we often in communities overlook how much people are learning just by being in a space and absorbing how things are being done. And for people that are maybe new to senior living or not, when you're in a medical model, you absorb a lot about what the norms are in a medical setting. So if we truly want to disrupt further, but also be doing the job while you're disrupting the job, I think we have to very intentionally train employees and empower them to recognize what is happening systemically and see, like to kind of, to Alicia's point, sit in the discomfort. Because there's a desire, I think people want to either meld with the thing that they're becoming part of and accept the norms and go with that flow, or they want to fight against it, and then they often will not be able to stay in their role, right? So how do you teach people to stay in that uncomfortable space of doing amazing work, challenging the system, while also being part of the system? That's a real skill set, and it requires giving people reflective space and a real strong sense of team, and places to unpack uncomfortable things. I mentioned earlier, I think we have to push for dementia to be considered seriously as a part of any DEI work. That needs to be part of kind of the conversation nationally around disability and aging and intersectionality. And I keep on talking about systems today. I don't know why, but we have to create systems thinkers that can recognize these societal obstacles, not just individual ones. I think when we talk about this really exciting topic of large-scale reimagining of locked memory care units, I think Kirsten mentioned this earlier. There's so much fear around what that would mean, around, oh, will a caregiver be able to handle behaviors? Will people wander? What will happen? And I think that we can't expect, you know, everybody in our communities and our society to be able to envision those alternatives. I think we actually have to make those alternatives visible and perceptible so that people can understand, oh, there could be a different way. Because the honest take is, if we keep on building these same kinds of spaces, then the same kinds of things will happen in them. I'm a really big believer in this idea that the space cues how people use it. So if we continue to have a TV with a row of 4 armchairs in front of it, guess what? For the next 10 years of senior living, people are going to be sitting in front of a TV in a row of armchairs. So unless we can really work with architects and designers from day one to reimagine those spaces, you know, a memory support program coordinator 10 years down the road will be in a locked unit with a TV on. So I think that's the kind of systemic disruption that we have to do while simultaneously doing the work. It's a hard tension. So that also relates to this idea that we have to enable people to zoom in and zoom out. And again, when you're maybe dealing with burnout or staffing issues, how can you zoom out to the societal, the systemic, and zoom back into the person sitting in front of you? So for me, that ties back into what Angie just said, which is the short-term strategy, not the long-term change the world, but more creativity, more play, more collaboration. The idea that the way to sustain that kind of disruptive work is through making it playful and through entering, you know, that sense of joy and play and creativity, that creativity isn't the intervention of, you know, one program a week, but it is the whole environment and the way of being. And that's also what will give us the energy to be disruptors long-term and not, you know, go hide our heads in the sand.
Yeah, I big fan of Anne Basing. She also said something like, forget about memory, try creativity. And I think, you know, you're right. It's this whole paradigm shift of how do you enable. It's really about the moment. And we talked about it as we were preparing. Alicia, would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Absolutely. I believe it truly is also being creative in the space. But I do think we need to acknowledge that for the past couple of years, we've asked people to take their emotions and to really smush them down, right? And not feel.
Yeah.
And what we're now asking people to do with dementia inclusion is to feel again, right? And that's scary. And we've had a collective trauma. And so I think we need to take small steps forward. We need to make sure that we're acknowledging that this is scary and that we're going to make mistakes and it's going to be okay. And that will, you know, can't be as focused on risk all the time, but there has to be a balance. But I think we're, at least for strategy, for what I'm working on at the present time, is to plant those seeds and to nurture them. So across our organization, our goal is that all 5,000 of our team members will go through an experience called Dementia Live, which is with Educate. And it's an experience where we manipulate the environment, overwhelm someone's senses to give them an idea of what it is to try to process things differently, right? And that's processing maybe not being able to focus as well and not be able to complete the tasks and being given too many instructions at once and doing the things that we do on a daily basis without really thinking when we're interacting with people who have changing cognitive abilities. Really, when we're interacting with anyone, we tend to at least give too much directive, right? So that's one of our goals. So we're working to have each of our team members go through that experience and have that aha and try to have some more different emotions that we can all have a common conversation and relate back to. The other thing, you know, as far as strategy is, it's taking those small steps again, just unlocking the gardens that are already secure and being able to let people go outside. If you locked me in, I don't think I would do okay. I know I wouldn't do okay. You know, that would be too much. And so with dementia inclusion, you know, yes, there's the concept of unlocking the doors, but it's also making sure that we have people where they want to be and making sure that they're at their highest level of functioning. And for some of us, that means we have to be outside in nature, right? That we need to be able to have that freedom of movement, to not be restricted. I have never done well being told what to do. If you ask me to do a favor, I absolutely will. If you tell me I have to do it, I struggle. And I know that about myself. And I would imagine that most of us are more like that than not, if we admit it honestly. And then the last strategy that I'm currently using that is in the early stages, is creating a dementia advisory group for the organization, where it can't be C-suite individuals making decisions for the residents, right? It needs to be a group of residents and family members and team members together to really figure out what are the main focuses, what should we do, how should we do it, and what needs to be our first challenges. So that's one of the things that I'm slowly working on behind the scenes, as a strategy for dementia inclusion. So,
Can I share a secret about you, Alicia?
I'm
You're a
worried.
fan- No, you and I are both had both an amazing experience at the Eden Alternative
We did.
conference, where we saw this great speaker called I never know how to pronounce this. In French, it's Tone Tobes, but
Yes.
I'm putting his name in the chat, and he has this amazing documentary. And you know what I thought was really cool about his session was that he repeated that the doors can be opened, it's work, but the hardest is to keep them open. And I think it's just a great, you know, we do focus on the door for obvious reasons, but the mentality and the culture is obviously what we want to go after. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Angie, you want to?
So yes, thinking back to our time at the Eden Alternative Conference, Toon and his relationship, yes, his relationship with the people living in the communities that he stayed in across the world was absolutely beautiful, and I would recommend anyone. He does have a book out. It's called I think it's called Housemates, and so it would be a great book for you guys to pick up, and he's very inspiring. So whenever I'm just thinking about both Carolyn and Alicia's thoughts, and I want to touch on nature for just 1 minute, because we've talked about creativity, and I want to talk a little more about nature and in our environment and what that looks like. So we can learn so much from nature and from trees around us, and how nature reacts and interacts with each other. And this is really part of building community. And so I'll always talk about community because that's my favorite thing. And so when you think about if we can focus on the door, or we can focus on the people, right? And so I think for me, that's really the key thing. It's very hard to create behavior change. And so we have to really think about, what does that loop of behavior change look like? And it's easy to say we can take down the door, but then what happens? Because people are so stuck in their routines, their routines are not going to change. And so it's, how do we work on those systems and those routines? And, you know, years ago we had a community, and it was like, oh, we took out the nurses station. And this was probably 20 years ago, right? And everybody was taking out those nurses stations, and we had a retreat, and I'll never forget it. I taught at this retreat. Everybody got fired up, and the administrator texted the maintenance guy and said, we want the nurses station gone by next week. And it was a total fail, right? Because there was no education, there was no why. And I think we really have to lean into, these are the reasons why we want to do this, and people really understanding that it's not the door, but it's the symbolism that the door represents, right? And so the strategy really has to be education in a different way, not on all of the principles and stages of dementia. Not that that's not great education, but it also has to be on, how are we fighting the stigma of dementia? What does that look like? And what's our why? Like, what's the purpose behind making this change? Because change for change's sake is just never good. And I think we get people on board with us more when they really start to understand the why. Oh, the nurses station was a barrier, and here's why. The door's a barrier, and here's why. And, you know, I think that opens up people into where we can really go, and what the future can look like. And then back to the environment, and this is where I want to bring in nature. It has never felt to me. So one of my favorite hotels, and I don't know if you all have ever stayed at those Gaylord hotels that have the inner arboretum, or, you know, it's just so relaxing. And I always think, why don't we have these in our environments in senior living? I don't understand, because how are we not, we're not bringing nature in. So I think a lot of times we fail on 2 counts. We're not taking people to nature, and we're not bringing nature to them enough. And so what does that look like? So, you know, Alicia just said, she needs nature and I do too. I'm a person that likes to put my feet in the grass, right? If I don't get that, it's not going to be a happy day, right? It's just not. And so, I like to be in the trees. I like to sit. I like to hear the birds. And, that's very peaceful and it's meaningful to me. It's not the same for every person. And that's where we have to stop the cookie cutter stuff and really have a strategy of what does it look like to honor the individual. And so I think that's my soapbox on that today, but I'll let you move on to our next question.
No, but don't get off that soapbox too quickly, Angie, please. Yeah. No, but I mean, we kind of started getting into that. I'm also really intrigued for the audience to hear from the three of you. We went from like vision, right? We know we have a pretty good idea of what the good looks like, right? Because we started to see that. And then the three of you explained how you're thinking about moving your organizations to that. But as you're starting to do that, I really want to hear what you see as the challenges to that. Why aren't we going faster? What's blocking you? Not only you, but you as an organization. And so, Carolyn, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but tell us, like, why aren't we there yet, basically? What's your main challenges?
Yeah. I mean, even having this conversation, you used the word vulnerability. It does take a level of vulnerability because it's kind of scary to admit to have been in an industry for 25 years or to have been doing work for 10 years and feel like, well, have I actually moved the needle on this topic? I don't know. That is it's going to send me into a swirling crisis, which I will deal with after this call.
Please don't.
But I think we all face that in various ways. So I think it's great to talk about the challenges. I think for me, a lot of the challenge comes around the pipeline. And what I mean by that is we are not addressing things early enough in our continuum or in our planning. Everything is being addressed when somebody is moving into a care venue setting. And that affects a couple things. I mean that both from like a staffing perspective. I mentioned earlier, one of the big challenges I have is I, across my organization, can seed and grow the most amazing talent around engagement and creativity and wellness, people that deeply care about it and do it well. But it means that they are carrying the weight of an entire model or philosophy or vision on their shoulders. And if they retire or change careers or have more children or whatever they do, it feels like things crumble. So I think we still have a systemic issue around what does it truly mean to share that wealth of knowledge across multiple people, while simultaneously, I sometimes will say I don't fully embrace the model of a global worker because I think there is something incredibly important about true talent around facilitating groups and really facilitating meaningful connection and facilitating that therapeutic environment and those skills that I don't want everybody to feel like they're all kind of the same worker. So there's no pipeline for engagement, true, engagement roles. And when those roles move on, we don't have a pipeline. So I think we need to be more creative around how do we recruit and grow and nurture people that want to do that kind of work. I also think from a bias and, again, back to the system, we need to do more to actually, on the beginning end of our continuum, unpack our dangerous value systems around the concept of independence and dependence and ability and disability, because that's where this all starts, that we have a system that emphasizes independence as the thing we're all striving for as we age. And if we become somehow less independent, we are not doing it right. So people don't want to leave an independent setting. They don't want to move into a care setting. They don't want to be perceived as less independent. And we're never going to tackle dementia unless we tackle independence, right? And kind of blow that idea up as a society. I also want to throw out there the challenge of, just in my thinking about this, wanting to have inclusive communities, right? I worry sometimes that what that vision looks like is somebody with dementia just coming along to everything else that's going on in the broader community, going to huge events, kind of getting lost in the shuffle. And I know that's not what we're talking about, but I don't ever want to lose the incredibly rich, meaningful, intimate, small group connection. I think often our memory support programming is far cooler than our independent living programming. It's so much more exciting and spontaneous and vulnerable and intimate and creative. And I don't want that to be thrown out with the bathwater so that we can all go to the things we think look more fancy and independent. So again, it's this idea of what are our biases around what independent engagement looks like and care venue engagement looks like? What are our biases around what those environments look like? Even recognizing that engagement doesn't have to mean being part of a group. You could be independently walking somewhere and you are having a perfectly engaged life. So I'm rambling because this is what I do. And given questions like this, the only other thing I want to say is we can't talk about challenges without talking about burnout. That I think with burnout comes the inability to recognize the system because you're just trying to survive and get through the day. And I guess we have to have realistic conversations about what is realistic to ask of our team and of ourselves around changing whole systems and changing society when we have to take care of ourselves too. I don't have the answer to that. So anybody that wants to put that in the chat, please do.
Thanks, Carolyn. Alicia, how about your challenges? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, ditto. No, that's not a good enough answer though, is it? And Caroline, we will have our existential crisis together after this, because I think there's many of us, probably more than half the people in the call that, you know, struggle with what difference am I making? But we are making a difference every single day. And I think, oh gosh, one of the gentlemen early this morning who said we need to count who we've touched, who we've positively impacted. Thank you, Chris. I mean, there's so much merit in writing down every night, what did I do that was good? But what if we took that to the next step, and before we left work for the day, we had a huddle and we said to each other, okay, here's, you know, there's the usual nursing report, you know, you find out everything that went wrong, but what went right? And that can start to change the conversation and the focus and the language we use, because if we start to focus on the positive, it will hopefully become more contagious, right? It's so easy to be negative, but we need to focus on the positive and enforce that with each other, and hold each other accountable when we're, you know, being bitter or ugly, and that's, you know, and then others are feeling it. But then also holding each other accountable when we are having a really good day, or we've noticed something substantial, or even, you know, bringing someone a cup of coffee is substantial, you know, holding the door for someone. I mean, sometimes that's the little things that make a big difference. The other thing I think is an obstacle is, you know, as an industry, we're just so risk adverse. You know, I can't handle when we call things an elopement, but they were sitting on the front porch of the personal care, you know, but that wasn't designated as a safe space. And there wasn't staff, staff didn't know, the team didn't know they were out there. And then how do we address that with the resident? Are we, how kind are we in our words, right? Are we saying to them, hey, you know, next time, can you let me know? I would love to be out here with you too. Or are we saying, hey, you shouldn't have been out there by yourself? Right. And so our risk aversion, and then how we react to that risk aversion, I think is really a challenge, because we get reprimanded when we have a misstep, right? And that just makes us have fear, and that you know, that doesn't always have the healthy consequences we would hope. I guess the last thing I would say that I find is an obstacle is that we somehow expect everyone to be a little more robotic when they come to work, and then we expect the residents also to not have emotions. And just because I might have cried this morning does not mean I'm depressed, right? Just because I went and looked out the door window doesn't mean I'm going to run and join the circus, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to, you know, go off on my own. But we go to these extreme reactions right away. And I think we just need to like take a breath, a collective breath, and figure out that things are going to be okay. And our emotions are just as valid, and it's okay to not be okay today. And it's wonderful to be wonderful. And, you know, let's kind of live in the moment with it and work through some of these obstacles.
Yeah.
So there, I rambled too there. So
I guess we'll be the rambling panel today. That's quite amazing. That's quite all right. That's quite great. Angie, let's ramble together. What do you have?
Let's ramble for just a minute. This is such a great conversation. So think about this. What if our challenge was ourselves? And I think about this often, like our bias, our language, our attitude, the way we reflect, the way we deflect onto others, all of those things kind of create this big momentum, right? And so when you think about what Felicia and Carolyn said about positivity, and how do you imbue that positivity and those things around around where you're working and with the elders, because how do we do that, and how do we get the work done, right? Because we should we should love our jobs, right, guys? And we want everyone around us to love their jobs too. And that really comes from that positive attitude in workplace, and really acknowledging so much of the words we say. And so we'll get on this. I saw someone put in the chat. We've taught a lot over the years about words make worlds. And I know you can go over to the Eat Alternative website and probably download some word changes. But when you start to think about that, I remember I was in a training. I was in a dementia training years ago. Imagine that. And I was at this breakout table, and this lady starts talking about one of the elders in their community, and she's calling them the awful word, right? The hoarder. And we've all heard it, and that's the hoarder. And she does this for hours. And then finally I said, well, what's her name again? And how do we repurpose it back to who this person is? But then the thing is at the end of that day, she said, why don't you come over to the community? And what do you think my first reaction was? I've heard all day about this person, and all I can think about is, should I take my purse? Is it safe? Or, I mean, I want you to think about that, because the words that we say about people really stick with people who have never met those people, who don't know anything about them, and really don't know them in meaning. So this is really important, because we deflect what we think about people onto them, and other people pick that up and they run with it. So you'll hear that in your communities all day long, and you'll hear those words. And how do we change that? Because it feels like Carolyn said, well, we've been in this cycle for 20 years. Really, enough is enough. How do we stop it? How do we change it? And then so the other thing that I think really is back to the systems and processes. Unless there's a behavior change, I promise you'll continue that same cycle. All of the things that are happening are just going to continue to go, and that's the way it is, until you have really invested in how you're going to create the behavior change, how you're going to reinforce it and hold people accountable to it. Because the institutional dragon is what I call it. It's always there. It grew up here. This is its feeding ground. Just imagine it in your community. It's just lurking. It's just waiting, right? It's waiting to take action. It's waiting for that one action to creep back in. And guess what? It was COVID, right? And we saw the institutional dragon creep back in, and we saw all of that risk aversity that we've worked so hard to advocate against come right back, because we have communities and millions of dollars of lawsuit related to COVID, which is not their fault, right? And so really think about that, and how we break that cycle, because I think that is our biggest challenge, is ourselves and our our reactions, our biases, and our systems that really need to be remodeled.
Yeah. This dragon for sure. Yeah. So thank you so much, Angie. As we're going to try to wrap up in the next 6 minutes or so, I'd love to hear maybe a thought or a prompt for the audience of how they can improve, take a big step, a small step, a medium step. What would you challenge the audience to do today or tomorrow when they think about all of your discussions today? And I'll let any one of you start if you want.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and go really quick. I think for me, one, it's celebrate the wins. Like, celebrate your wins. Don't think you have to have conquered the entire world before you can celebrate. Celebrate every small win, because it's a victory that moves you forward and gives your team confidence. So think about that. How do you celebrate the wins? And small cycles of change. Don't get overwhelmed. So stick to what's the small cycle of change and then celebrate that and move to your next small cycle. They build off each other.
Thanks, Angie.
Angie, my idea was going to be very much like that, so I can piggyback off of you, but I'll add in an extra, which is, first of all, find your people and don't give up. And so I would say, you know, I see even names of some of my like co-conspirators on our screen right now with Jen and Meg and Kirsten and Charles and everybody. But don't give up. It's going to be an uphill battle, but don't give up. And to relate to what Angie said is that we have to focus on strengths. So I think the way out of this mess is not to brainstorm around what's not working, because that is exhausting and overwhelming and the despair mountain takes over, but we have to focus on what is working. So I would say, look at what you think is most successful in your community or in your program and ask why and build on that, because that is where the magic happens. And then I have to just give a plug for what I've kind of said a couple times, which is make sure you include biases about dementia and the unpacking of assumptions we make about dementia in training programs, rather than just kind of the Dementia 101. And, you know, invite various levels of leadership and families and residents and employees to go through that process of unpacking, rather than just receiving information about neurological changes.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you.
I think I would like to, we've all mentioned it with the emotions and the burnout. And I know I've seen in the chat some, you know, concerning comments about burnout. So let's just address the, you know, the elephant in the room. We've all been there. We've all had our moments where we're like, I don't know that I can do this anymore. We've all had those heartbreaks when we lose someone and then they build up and our emotional freezer gets too full. And part of, I think, us doing a better job at work is first sometimes acknowledging that getting out of bed is the first trick, and that is huge some days. And then next is putting on the fake smile sometimes until we feel it. But then the real one is forgiving yourself when you are feeling like things aren't so great right now, right? And you feel like it's a huge mountain, and forgiving yourself for making a mistake, and finding that, you know, like Carolyn said, finding your tribe, finding your people, but also finding that source of support, so that when you're, you know, when you're having a great day, make sure everybody knows about it. But when you're having a bad day, find somebody to talk about it too, and don't just keep it wrapped up. Because I think that if we continue to not deal with our emotions at work, we continue to do the same thing, right? And then we don't treat people person-centered, we treat them how we feel right now. And so, you know, that I just wanted to kind of address it because I saw it in the chat, and, you know, everybody is doing amazing and everyone's doing their best. So,
yeah. Thank you, the three of you. You know, I think, I mean, to one of your earlier points that you shared, just saying that things aren't okay is okay, and it's actually part of the process. And and thank you for this aspect of maybe vulnerability. You know, I think that the fact is that, and to Carolyn's point, many of us, even with years of experience, and myself the first one, right? I have 17 years of experience in this industry. I'll share with you, like, I can walk sometime in a memory care community and I'm not walking the same way I would be walking if I was in a supermarket. And obviously there's reasons for that. But a lot of these reasons, it's bias, right? It's like, I want to be careful. I want to be cautious or overcautious or whatever. But that aspect, I mean, personally, I know I need to work on it. So thank you for sharing that. I was hoping to wrap up this session really well, and I just can't find enough words to just thank you. That's probably the way I'll end up this one, which is that the three of you are people that I really respect, and it's an honor to be able to collaborate with you on these. I hope we'll have many in the future, but just know that for me, I've learned from you, and I'm sure that these 700s or more people have learned. So Carolyn, as you delve into your existential crisis today, just be mindful of that, and a good day is a day where there's more Carolyn, Angie, and Alicia showing up at work. So thank you very much for the work you do. Have a wonderful, thank you again so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I think this has been wonderful, and the whole day has been amazing. So I'm so grateful that Charles, that you have offered the educations and gathered the collective individuals today. So
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it. I have a great team. I'm very lucky. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Caroline. Thank you so much, Angie. Everyone, we are closing out our 5th session now, and just as a quick note, we as all of our sessions, we love to share emails, so feel free to stay in touch with our speakers. And so we'll now stop the recording and wrap up session number 5 and dive into